Welcome to Mystery Haven. I'm Eleanor Thorne. Settle in with a cup of tea, dear listeners, and let's unravel a tale of intrigue in the style of the great Agatha Christie. Before we begin, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I'd love to know. This is a long, cozy mystery, perfect for relaxing. So let's step into the 1920s and the opulent Jade Conservatory, where secrets bloom as vividly as the flowers. Here's the first of our 10 chapters, narrated with a warm British charm and a deliberate pace to draw you deep into the mystery. Chapter 1. Introduction and Setup. The rain fell in a gentle, persistent drizzle, tapping against the arched glass roof of the Jade Conservatory, a jewel nestled within the sprawling grounds of Ashbourne Manor. An hour's drive from the bustling heart of 1920s London. The conservatory, with its intricate jade-green tiles and towering palms, was a testament to botanical ambition, its air thick with the heavy perfume of rare orchids and the faint hum of secrets. Gas lamps cast flickering golden light across the lush foliage, illuminating the delicate fronds and vibrant blooms that Sir Reginald Ashbourne, the manor's widower-owner, had cultivated with obsessive pride. Tonight, the conservatory was not merely a showcase of nature's wonders, but the stage for a gathering that promised more than polite conversation. Hercule Poirot, the diminutive Belgian detective with a moustache as precise as his mind, stood near a cluster of vivid Malaysian orchids, his sharp eyes scanning the room with the quiet intensity of a hawk. His tailored suit was immaculate, his posture erect, and his small hands clasped behind his back as he absorbed every detail of the scene. Sir Reginald had invited him to Ashbourne Manor under the pretext of admiring a newly acquired orchid, a rare specimen rumoured to be worth a small fortune. But Poirot's instincts, honed by years of unravelling human deceit, told him there was more at play. Sir Reginald's letter had hinted at delicate matters, requiring Poirot's famed discretion, and the detective sensed a storm brewing beneath the manor's polished surface. The guests, an eclectic assembly of 5, mingled with varying degrees of ease, their voices rising and falling against the backdrop of the rain. Poirot observed them with the precision of a watchmaker, noting their gestures, their glances, the subtle tensions that betrayed their carefully curated facades. First among them was Miss Clara Ashbourne, Sir Reginald's niece, a striking woman of 28, with chestnut hair swept into an elegant chignon, and an emerald gown that caught the lamplight. Her sharp wit and modern ideas, plans to transform the estate into a hub of agricultural innovation, had sparked heated arguments with her uncle, who preferred tradition to progress. Clara's eyes, bright with ambition, flickered with frustration as she sipped her champagne, her gaze occasionally darting to Sir Reginald with a mix of affection and defiance. Next was Dr. Harold Vance, the family physician, a lean man of 40 with thinning hair and a nervous habit of adjusting his wire-rimmed spectacles. His devotion to Sir Reginald was evident in his attentive nods, but Poirot noted a tightness in his jaw, a hint of resentment perhaps tied to unpaid fees or a deeper grievance. Dr. Vance's medical bag, resting unobtrusively by his chair, suggested a man always prepared, yet his fidgeting fingers betrayed unease. Lady Evelyn Marwood, a widowed socialite in her late 30s, glided through the room with the grace of a seasoned hostess, her sapphire necklace glinting as she laughed at Sir Reginald's anecdotes. Her charm was effortless, but Poirot's keen eye caught the calculating glint in her gaze. Rumours swirled that her late husband's debts weighed heavily, and her friendship with Sir Reginald was said to be her lifeline to financial stability. Mr. Julian Carver, a brash young stockbroker with slicked-back hair and a penchant for flashy cufflinks, stood apart, his restless energy palpable. His risky investments, bankrolled by Sir Reginald, had recently soured, and the strain was evident in his forced smiles and the way he tugged at his collar. Finally, there was Mrs. Beatrice Langston, the conservatory's botanist, a stern woman of 50, whose plain attire contrasted sharply with the room's opulence. Her hands, calloused from years of tending orchids, clutched a notebook filled with meticulous sketches, and her eyes burned with a quiet intensity. Sir Reginald's dismissive attitude toward her expertise, treating her as little more than a gardener, had left her bitter, her devotion to the conservatory bordering on fanaticism. Sir Reginald himself, a portly man of 60 with a ruddy complexion and a booming voice, dominated the gathering. His wealth, amassed through colonial trade, was matched only by his pride in the Jade Conservatory, which he claimed rivaled the botanical gardens of Kew. As he led the guests on a tour of the glass-walled sanctuary, his anecdotes were laced with self-aggrandizement, each orchid a trophy of his success. "This Malaysian beauty," he declared, gesturing to the prized bloom, "cost me more than most men earn in a lifetime." The guests murmured polite admiration, but Poirot noted their strained expressions. Clara's tight-lipped smile, Dr. Vance's distracted nod, Lady Evelyn's overly enthusiastic clap, Carver's impatient shuffle, and Mrs. Langston's scowl as she muttered about the orchid's delicate care requirements. The conservatory itself was a marvel, its design both beautiful and forbidding. The single entrance, a heavy oak door reinforced with iron, was secured by a sturdy bolt, and only 2 keys existed, one in Sir Reginald's possession, the other held by Mrs. Langston. The glass walls, thick and unyielding, offered no other access. And the roof, a lattice of iron and glass, was sealed against the elements. Poirot's mind catalogued these details, sensing the conservatory's fortress-like quality. It was, he mused, the perfect setting for an impossible crime, a puzzle worthy of his little grey cells. As the tour progressed, Sir Reginald's joviality faltered. He paused near a display of rare ferns, his hand resting on the jade-handled letter opener he kept on a small mahogany desk. A curious choice for a conservatory, Poirot thought. "My friends," Sir Reginald said, his voice lowering, "this estate is my legacy, but it is not without its burdens." His eyes lingered on Clara, then Carver and Poirot caught a fleeting shadow of unease. Was it a warning? A confession? Before Poirot could ponder further, Lady Evelyn deftly changed the subject, proposing a toast to the conservatory's splendour. The group moved toward the manor for dinner, leaving the conservatory locked behind them. Poirot, however, lingered, claiming a desire to study the orchids further. In truth, he was drawn to the undercurrent of tension that hung in the air like the scent of the blooms. He paced the tiled floor, his shoes clicking softly, and examined the desk where the letter opener gleamed. A faint smudge of red clay caught his eye, out of place on the pristine tiles. He crouched to inspect it, his mind racing. The clay was not native to the conservatory's carefully curated soil beds. A clue, perhaps, or a careless mistake. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the glass like a warning. Poirot straightened, his moustache twitching as he sensed the gathering storm, not of weather but of human passions. The Jade Conservatory, with its locked doors and hidden rivalries, was a stage set for tragedy. As he rejoined the guests in the manor, their laughter echoing down the oak-panelled halls, Poirot knew that the night would bring more than polite farewells. Dear listeners, what a peculiar gathering we've stumbled upon, isn't it? The conservatory hums with secrets, each guest a thread in a tangled web. Where do you think this trail will lead? Share your thoughts below, and let's savour the mystery as it unfolds. Chapter 2. The Crime Discovered. The rain had thickened into a steady downpour, cloaking Ashbourne Manor in a veil of mist that blurred the edges of the sprawling estate. Inside the manor, the guests had retired to the dining room, where crystal chandeliers cast a soft glow over polished silver and starched linens. The clink of wine glasses and the murmur of forced pleasantries filled the air. But Hercule Poirot, ever observant, had chosen to linger in the Jade Conservatory. The Belgian detective stood alone among the orchids, his small frame dwarfed by the towering glass walls, his sharp eyes tracing the contours of the locked room. He had sensed an undercurrent of unease during Sir Reginald Ashbourne's tour, and his instincts, as reliable as the ticking of a Swiss clock, urged him to remain. The conservatory was silent now, save for the rhythmic patter of rain on the glass roof. The heavy oak door, secured with its iron bolt, stood as a sentinel, and the jade-green tiles gleamed under the flickering gas lamps. Poirot's fingers brushed the mahogany desk where Sir Reginald's jade-handled letter opener rested, its polished surface catching the light. He noted again the faint smudge of red clay on the floor, an anomaly in the pristine setting. His little grey cells hummed, piecing together the evening's observations. The strained smiles of Clara Ashbourne, the nervous tics of Dr. Harold Vance, the calculated charm of Lady Evelyn Marwood, the restless energy of Julian Carver, and the barely concealed bitterness of Mrs. Beatrice Langston. Each guest, he mused, carried a motive as vibrant as the orchids surrounding him. At precisely 10:15 p.m., the stillness shattered. A piercing scream tore through the night, its echo reverberating off the glass walls of the conservatory. Poirot's head snapped up, his moustache twitching as he recognized the voice. Clara Ashbourne, her tone laced with raw panic. The scream came from within the conservatory, impossible though it seemed, for the door remained locked, and Poirot himself had been alone. He moved swiftly to the entrance, his polished shoes clicking on the tiles, and tested the bolt. It held firm, unyielding. Footsteps pounded from the manor, and within moments the guests and household staff converged, their faces pale with alarm. Clara was first to reach the door, her emerald gown dishevelled, her eyes wide with horror. "It's Uncle Reginald!" she cried, her voice trembling. "I heard a noise, a thud, and then I saw— oh, God!" Behind her, Mrs. Langston, the botanist, fumbled with her key, her hands shaking so violently that Poirot gently took it from her. "Allow me, madame," he said, his calm authority steadying the chaos. He unlocked the door, the bolt sliding back with a heavy clunk, and the group poured into the conservatory. The sight that greeted them was ghastly. Sir Reginald Ashbourne lay sprawled among the orchids, his portly frame crumpled on the jade-tiled floor. A pool of blood spread beneath him, stark against the pale tiles, and the jade-handled letter opener, last seen on the desk, was now embedded in his chest. Beside him, the rare Malaysian orchid, the pride of his collection, lay crushed, its delicate petals scattered like confetti. The air was thick with the metallic tang of blood, mingling with the conservatory's floral sweetness. Clara gasped, clutching Lady Evelyn's arm, while Dr. Vance knelt beside the body, his medical instincts overriding his shock. "He's dead," he pronounced, his voice hollow. "Stabbed, likely within the last hour." Poirot's eyes swept the scene, cataloguing every detail with surgical precision. The conservatory remained a sealed fortress. The door had been locked, the glass walls intact, the roof unbreached. No windows were open, no other exits disturbed. An impossible crime, a locked room murder that defied logic. He crouched beside the body, noting the letter opener's clean handle. No fingerprints, suggesting the killer had been meticulous. Sir Reginald's key, still in his pocket, ruled out theft as a motive for the key itself. The crushed orchid puzzled him. Was it a casualty of a struggle, or a deliberate act? The red clay smudge, now joined by a faint trace near the body, hinted at an intruder's presence, yet the locked door mocked such a theory. Inspector Japp, summoned from London by a frantic telegram, arrived within the hour, his familiar bluster cutting through the tension. "A locked room murder, Poirot?" he exclaimed, rubbing his hands with a mix of exasperation and excitement. "This'll be a devil of a puzzle, even for you." Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile, his eyes gleaming with the challenge. "The impossible, mon ami, is merely the possible in disguise," he replied, already pacing the crime scene. He examined the letter opener closely, confirming it was the same one from the desk. Its blade, sharp and precise, had pierced Sir Reginald's heart, suggesting a single forceful blow. Dr. Vance estimated the time of death between 9:30 and 10 past p.m., shortly after the group had left the conservatory for dinner. The guests, now gathered in a tense semicircle, reacted with a spectrum of emotions. Clara's grief seemed genuine, her hands trembling as she clutched a handkerchief, yet Poirot noted a flicker of something else. Guilt, perhaps, or fear. Dr. Vance's nervous tics intensified, his spectacles slipping as he muttered about the tragedy. Lady Evelyn maintained an almost theatrical composure, her sapphire necklace glinting as she murmured condolences, though her eyes darted to the crushed orchid with curious intensity. Julian Carver, pale and sweating, muttered about ruined prospects, his fingers twisting his cufflinks. Mrs. Langston, clutching a broken orchid stem, stared at the body with a face so contorted with rage that Poirot wondered if her anger was directed at Sir Reginald or the desecration of her beloved plants. Poirot questioned the group, his voice soft but probing. Clara explained that she had returned to the conservatory to retrieve a shawl left behind during the tour, only to hear a thud and find her uncle's body through the glass door. "I screamed and ran for help," she said, her voice breaking. Mrs. Langston confirmed the door was locked when she arrived, her key unused since the tour's end. The others claimed to have been in the dining room, though their alibis were vague, unsupported by witnesses. Poirot's mind raced. How had the killer entered and exited a locked room? Had Sir Reginald been alone, or had someone lingered unseen? He inspected the conservatory again, his movements deliberate. A faint scent of tobacco lingered near the body, curious since Sir Reginald did not smoke. The red, clay smudge, now more pronounced near the desk, suggested a recent disturbance, perhaps from the killer's shoes. A torn scrap of paper, tucked beneath an orchid pot, caught his eye. He retrieved it with a handkerchief, revealing the words "repay by midnight" in a hurried scrawl. A debt, a threat. The clue was tantalizing, but Poirot suspected it might be a distraction, a red herring planted to mislead. Japp's men searched the conservatory, but found no additional clues, no gloves, no tools, no signs of forced entry. The bolt, sturdy and untampered, mocked their efforts. Poirot, undeterred, knelt by the crushed orchid, noting its deliberate placement. This was no accident, he murmured, his mind conjuring the image of a killer orchestrating chaos to conceal their intent. The conservatory, with its locked door and glass walls, was a puzzle box, and Poirot was determined to unlock its secrets. As the rain continued to drum against the glass, the guests were ushered back to the manor, their whispers filled with fear and suspicion. Poirot remained, his silhouette framed by the flickering lamps, his little grey cells already weaving a tapestry of clues and contradictions. The Jade Conservatory, once a haven of beauty, was now a stage for murder. And the truth, Poirot knew, lay hidden in the shadows of its blooms. Oh, dear listeners, what a chilling discovery! A locked room, a deadly blade, and 5 suspects with secrets as deep as the night. Where do you think this mystery leads? Share your guesses in the comments, and let's unravel this puzzle together in the next chapter. Chapter 3. Investigation begins. The Jade Conservatory stood silent under the relentless rain, its glass walls glistening like a crystal cage in the dim light of the gas lamps. The grisly discovery of Sir Reginald Ashbourne's body, stabbed with his own jade-handled letter-opener, sprawled among the crushed remains of his prized Malaysian orchid, had transformed the opulent greenhouse into a chilling crime scene. Hercule Poirot, the diminutive Belgian detective, stood at the centre of the conservatory, his sharp eyes darting from the blood-stained tiles to the heavy oak door, its iron bolts still locked when the body was found. The impossibility of the crime, a murder in a sealed room, ignited his little grey cells, and he knew the truth lay hidden in the details. Inspector Japp, his face flushed with the urgency of the case, paced the tiled floor, his boots leaving faint scuff marks. "This locked room business, Poirot," he muttered. "It's got me stumped. Door bolted, no windows broken, no way in or out. Yet here's Sir Reginald, dead as a doornail." Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Patience, mon ami," he replied, his voice calm and precise. "The impossible is merely a matter of perspective. We must observe, deduce, and let the facts speak." Poirot began his investigation with methodical precision, summoning each of the 5 suspects to the manor's library. A wood-panelled sanctuary, heavy with the scent of old books and cigar smoke. The room, lit by a crackling fire, offered a stark contrast to the conservatory's glassy chill, yet the tension among the guests was palpable. Poirot seated himself in a high-backed chair, his small hands folded neatly, and invited the first suspect, Clara Ashbourne, to speak. Clara, her emerald gown now creased from the night's chaos, sat stiffly, her eyes red-rimmed but defiant. "I was in the drawing-room with Lady Evelyn after the tour," she said, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "We were discussing the estate's future. Uncle Reginald's refusal to modernize was frustrating." Poirot noted the pause, the flicker of resentment in her words. Her alibi, though, hinged on Lady Evelyn's corroboration, and Poirot sensed a fragility in their shared story. "And what time did you leave the drawing-room, mademoiselle?" he asked, his gaze piercing. Clara hesitated, then said, "Around 9:45, I think. I went to fetch my shawl from the conservatory, and that's when I found him." Her voice broke, but Poirot's eyes lingered on her, sensing a half-truth. Next came Lady Evelyn Marwood, her sapphire necklace glinting as she settled gracefully into the chair. Her composure was impeccable, her smile almost too serene. "Clara and I were together," she said. Lady Evelyn confirmed, her voice smooth as silk. "We talked until nearly 10. Then I retired to my room." Poirot noticed a missing clasp on her necklace, a detail absent during the tour. "Your necklace, madame," he said mildly. "It appears damaged. Did it perhaps break in the conservatory?" Lady Evelyn's smile faltered, her fingers brushing the necklace. "Oh, it must have come loose earlier. I didn't notice," she said. But her vague reply only deepened Poirot's suspicion. Dr. Harold Vance, the family physician, entered next, his spectacles slipping as he adjusted them nervously. "I was in my guest room, reading medical journals," he said, his voice clipped. "Alone, I'm afraid. No one can vouch for me." His weak alibi was compounded by his jittery demeanour, and Poirot noted the faint tremor in his hands. "You attended Sir Reginald regularly, oui?" Poirot asked. "Were there tensions, perhaps, over unpaid fees?" Dr. Vance's eyes widened, then narrowed. "He was a difficult patient, but I was loyal," he snapped, though his defensiveness betrayed more than he intended. Julian Carver, the young stockbroker, slouched into the chair, his flashy cufflinks glinting as he fidgeted. "I was on the terrace smoking," he said, his voice edged with irritation. "No one saw me, but I wasn't near the conservatory. Why would I be?" His financial ties to Sir Reginald, risky investments now souring, made him a prime suspect, and Poirot's question about a recent argument drew a flushed denial. "We had words, sure, but murder? That's absurd." Carver's bluster, Poirot thought, masked a deeper fear. Finally, Mrs. Beatrice Langston, the botanist, sat rigidly, her calloused hands clutching her notebook of orchid sketches. "I was in my cottage, tending my own plants," she said, her voice cold. "I locked the conservatory after the tour and didn't return until Clara's scream." Poirot's eyes fell to her boots, caked with red clay, unlike the conservatory's sterile soil. "Your boots, madame," he said. "They suggest a recent walk. Perhaps to the conservatory?" Mrs. Langston's face tightened. "I garden at night. It's no crime," she retorted, but her defiance rang hollow. With the interviews complete, Poirot returned to the conservatory, Jap trailing behind. The crime scene was undisturbed, the blood now congealed around Sir Reginald's body. Poirot knelt by the jade-handled letter opener, confirming its clean handle. No fingerprints, a sign of premeditation. The crushed Malaysian orchid, its petals scattered deliberately, suggested more than a struggle. Was it a message? A distraction? The red clay smudge, now joined by a faint trail near the desk, intrigued him. He traced it to a corner of the conservatory, where it vanished beneath a heavy planter. The clay, he recalled, matched the soil in Mrs. Langston's cottage garden, a clue too precise to ignore. Poirot's attention turned to the torn scrap of paper found earlier, bearing the words, "Repay by midnight." He examined it under a lamp, noting the hurried handwriting, unlike Sir Reginald's precise script. A debt, perhaps, pointing to Carver's financial woes, or a planted clue to mislead. The faint tobacco scent near the body, absent during the tour, was another anomaly. Sir Reginald did not smoke, but Poirot recalled Carver's cigarette habit and Mrs. Langston's secretive demeanour. Had one of them lingered in the conservatory? The locked door remained the heart of the puzzle. Poirot tested the bolt, finding it sturdy with a faint scratch on its surface, a sign of tampering or mere wear. The key, still in Sir Reginald's pocket, ruled out theft, but Mrs. Langston's duplicate key raised questions. Had she used it after the tour? The glass walls, thick and unyielding, offered no entry points, and the roof's iron lattice was secure. Poirot paced, his mind conjuring scenarios. A hidden passage? An accomplice? The conservatory was a fortress, yet the killer had struck and vanished. Jap's men searched the manor, finding no gloves, no tools, no signs of forced entry. A groundskeeper, questioned by Jap, reported seeing a shadowy figure near the conservatory at 9:45 p.m., tall, cloaked, unidentifiable. The sighting was vague, but it aligned with Clara's timeline of hearing a thud. Poirot's suspicions deepened about the alibis. Clara and Lady Evelyn's story wavered under scrutiny. Clara's shawl excuse felt rehearsed, and Lady Evelyn's missing clasp suggested a presence in the conservatory after the tour. Dr. Vance's solitary reading offered no defence, while Carver's terrace alibi was unverified. Mrs. Langston's muddy boots contradicted her claim of staying in her cottage. Poirot stood by the desk, his fingers brushing the spot where the letter opener had rested. The red clay, the tobacco scent, the cryptic note, they were threads in a tapestry of deception. He closed his eyes, letting his little grey cells weave them together. The killer had planned meticulously, exploiting the conservatory's isolation, but they had left traces, careless, human traces. "The truth, mon ami," he murmured to Japp, "is in the contradictions. We must follow them." As the rain drummed on, Poirot's mind raced, reconstructing the evening's timeline. The murder, between 9:30 and 10 p.m., occurred after the tour, but before Clara's scream. The locked room mocked logic, yet Poirot knew the answer lay within its glass walls. He glanced at the crushed orchid, its ruin a silent accusation. The Jade Conservatory, once a haven of beauty, now held a killer's secret, and Poirot was determined to unearth it. Chapter 4. Clues and Red Herrings. The Jade Conservatory, bathed in the pale glow of dawn, stood as a silent witness to the previous night's horror. The rain had eased to a faint drizzle, but the air within the glass walls remained heavy with the scent of orchids and the lingering tang of blood. Sir Reginald Ashbourne's body had been removed, but the spot where he fell, marked by a dark stain on the jade-green tiles, drew Hercule Poirot's gaze like a magnet. The Belgian detective, his tailored suit pristine despite the sleepless night, paced the conservatory with measured steps, his moustache twitching as his little grey cells churned. The locked room murder, with its sealed door and unbreached glass, was a puzzle that demanded precision, and Poirot was determined to unravel its secrets. Inspector Japp, his face etched with frustration, hovered nearby, his notebook filled with scribbled observations. "This case is a tangle, Poirot," he grumbled, flipping pages. "No fingerprints, no forced entry, and that blasted orchid crushed to bits. What's it all mean?" Poirot's eyes gleamed with quiet intensity. "It means, mon ami, that the killer wishes to confuse us. But every clue, even the false ones, tells a story." He knelt by the stained tiles, his fingers hovering over the spot where the jade-handled letter opener had pierced Sir Reginald's heart. The clean handle, wiped of prints, spoke of calculation, but the crushed Malaysian orchid, its petals deliberately scattered, hinted at something more. A message, a distraction, or perhaps both. Poirot's investigation deepened as he revisited the clues unearthed thus far. The red clay smudge, first noted near the desk and now traced to a trail near the body, was a tantalizing lead. He had confirmed with a groundskeeper that the clay matched the soil in Mrs. Beatrice Langston's cottage garden, a fact she had dismissed with a curt claim of nighttime gardening. Poirot's mind lingered on her muddy boots, so out of place in the conservatory's sterile environment. "Madame Langston," he murmured to himself, "what were you doing in the rain?" He moved to the heavy oak door, its iron bolt still bearing the faint scratch he had noticed earlier. The scratch was subtle, barely visible, but it suggested tampering. Or was it merely wear from years of use? Poirot tested the bolt again, its mechanism smooth but unyielding. The door had been locked when Clara's scream summoned the household, and only Sir Reginald and Mrs. Langston held keys. Yet the killer had struck and vanished. A new clue emerged as Poirot examined the conservatory's outer perimeter, accompanied by a reluctant Jap. Near the glass wall, half hidden by a fern, lay a cigarette butt, its paper damp but intact. Poirot retrieved it with a handkerchief, noting its brand, Turkish, the same as those smoked by Julian Carver. Monsieur Carver claimed to smoke on the terrace, Poirot said, his voice thoughtful, yet this is far from the terrace. Jap's eyes narrowed. So he lied about his whereabouts. That's damning Poirot. But Poirot shook his head. Or it is a red herring, placed to mislead. We must be cautious, mon ami. Carver's financial troubles, his risky investments bankrolled by Sir Reginald, made him a suspect, but the cigarette felt too convenient, too perfectly incriminating. Inside the conservatory, Poirot's attention turned to a discovery from the previous night. Lady Evelyn Marwood's missing necklace clasp, found near a wrought-iron bench. He had questioned her about it, and her vague explanation that it must have fallen during the tour rang hollow. Poirot approached the bench, running his fingers along its edge. The clasp, small and silver, lay in a crevice, as if dropped in haste. Madame Marwood was here after the tour, he mused, but why? Her alibi, tied to Clara's, claimed they were together in the drawing-room until 9:45 p.m. Yet the clasp suggested a return to the conservatory, perhaps during the murder's narrow window. Dr. Harold Vance's medical bag left in the library offered another thread. Poirot, with Jap's permission, examined its contents, finding a vial of sedative, chloral hydrate, potent enough to incapacitate a man. Could Sir Reginald have been drugged? Jap asked, his voice hopeful. Poirot frowned, recalling Dr. Vance's nervous tics and weak alibi of reading alone. It is possible, he said, but we must await the autopsy. The vial was full, untouched, yet its presence raised questions. Had Dr. Vance planned to use it, only to resort to the letter opener? Or was the sedative another distraction, meant to cloud the investigation? The torn scrap of paper, bearing the words "repay by midnight," remained a focal point. Poirot studied it under a magnifying glass, noting the ink's fresh sheen and the handwriting's hurried scrawl, unlike Sir Reginald's meticulous script. The note pointed to Carver's financial woes, but a search of Carver's room, conducted by Jap's men, uncovered a forged promissory note in Sir Reginald's name suggesting blackmail. Carver was desperate, Jap said, seizing on the find. He owed Sir Reginald thousands. Poirot nodded but cautioned, Desperation is a motive, but this note feels staged. Why leave it so carelessly? The possibility of a plant, a red herring to divert suspicion, gnawed at him. Poirot returned to the conservatory, his mind sifting through the suspects' alibis, each riddled with gaps. Clara's claim of fetching her shawl seemed rehearsed, her timeline shaky. Lady Evelyn's composure masked a calculating mind, her clasp a silent accusation. Dr. Vance's solitary reading offered no defence, and his sedative vial hinted at darker intentions. Carver's cigarette butt and forged note painted him as a prime suspect, yet the evidence felt too neat. Mrs. Langston's muddy boots and red clay tied her to the scene, but her motive, resentment over her low salary and Sir Reginald's disregard, seemed insufficient for murder. A groundskeeper's report added another layer. He had seen a shadowy figure near the conservatory at 9:45 p.m., cloaked and unidentifiable, moving swiftly through the rain. The sighting aligned with Clara's claim of hearing a thud, but the figure's description was too vague to pinpoint a suspect. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he considered the conservatory's design. The glass walls, thick and seamless, offered no entry points. And the roof's iron lattice was secure. Yet the scratch on the bolt nagged at him. He examined it again, noting its fresh gleam. A tool, perhaps, he murmured, or a duplicate key. But no such key had been found, and Mrs. Langston's key produced at the scene showed no signs of tampering. Poirot's gaze fell to the crushed orchid, its ruin deliberate. He knelt, sifting through the petals, and found a single leaf, torn but intact, tucked beneath a pot. Its edge bore a faint smear of blood. Not Sir Reginald's, he suspected, but perhaps the killer's, caught in the act of staging the scene. The blood was too small a sample for immediate analysis, but Poirot pocketed it carefully, his mind racing. The orchid was not merely crushed, he said to Japp. It was arranged, a tableau to distract us. The question was why? Did it conceal a theft, a personal vendetta, or something deeper? As the morning wore on, Poirot tested the conservatory's boundaries, searching for hidden mechanisms. He tapped the tiles, pressed the walls, and inspected the drainage grates beneath the planters. Nothing yielded, yet the locked room puzzle gnawed at him. The red clay, the cigarette, the clasp, the note, the blood-smeared leaf. Each clue was a thread, but some were false, woven to mislead. Poirot's little grey cells worked furiously, sorting truth from deception. The killer had exploited the conservatory's isolation, but they had left traces, human errors that Poirot would exploit. Japp, growing impatient, pressed for a theory. Carver's got the strongest motive, Poirot. Debts, that note, the cigarette. Shall we bring him in? Poirot shook his head. Not yet, mon ami. The truth is, like an orchid, it blooms slowly, but it will not hide forever. He stood by the desk, his fingers brushing the spot where the letter opener had rested, and envisioned the murder, a swift, calculated act, followed by a meticulous cover-up. The conservatory, with its locked door and glass walls, was a stage, and the killer had played their part well. But Poirot, with his unerring eye for detail, was ready to rewrite the script. Chapter 5. Complications and Twists. The Jade Conservatory, bathed in the muted light of a rain-soaked afternoon, stood as a glass monument to mystery. The blood-stained tiles where Sir Reginald Ashbourne had fallen were scrubbed clean, but the air still carried the weight of his murder. A jade-handled letter opener plunged into his chest, the prized Malaysian orchid crushed beside him. Hercule Poirot, his small frame erect and his moustache impeccably waxed, paced the conservatory with the precision of a metronome. His little grey cells buzzed, grappling with the locked room puzzle. A sealed door, unbreached glass walls, and a killer who had vanished like a spectre. The clues, red clay, a cigarette butt, a missing necklace clasp, a cryptic note, a blood-smeared leaf, formed a tangled web, and Poirot sensed the truth was close, yet obscured by deception. Inspector Japp, his patience fraying, stood by the heavy oak door, its iron bolt a mocking reminder of the impossible crime. "We've got clues, Poirot, but they're leading nowhere," he exclaimed, gesturing at his notebook. Carver's cigarette, Langston's clay, Marwood's clasp. Someone's guilty, but who? Poirot's eyes gleamed with quiet resolve. "The truth, mon ami, hides in the contradictions. We must provoke it to reveal itself." His plan, unshared with Japp, was to unsettle the suspects, to stage a subtle trap that would expose a crack in their facades. Poirot's investigation took a dramatic turn with the arrival of Sir Reginald's solicitor, Mr. Percival Wren, a dour man with a briefcase stuffed with legal papers. In the Manor's drawing-room, under the watchful eyes of the suspects, Wren read Sir Reginald's will. The document was a bombshell. Clara Ashbourne, Sir Reginald's niece, inherited the estate, but only if she married within a year. A condition she visibly despised, her emerald-clad shoulders stiffening. Lady Evelyn Marwood was promised a generous annuity, contingent on the estate's solvency, a clause that drew a sharp glance from Julian Carver, whose failed investments threatened its finances. Dr. Harold Vance received a modest sum, barely enough to cover his debts, his spectacles slipping as he frowned. Mrs. Beatrice Langston, the botanist, was left nothing, despite her decades of service, her face darkening with suppressed rage. The will, Poirot noted, was a catalyst, sharpening motives and exposing raw tensions. A second crime jolted the investigation. Poirot, revisiting the conservatory, discovered that the Malaysian orchid thought crushed was missing. The scattered petals, which he had assumed were from the rare bloom, were from a common variety, deliberately arranged to mimic destruction. The real orchid, worth a fortune, had been stolen. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, his mind racing. The murder was a mask for theft, or was the theft a mask for murder? The revelation shifted the case's focus, suggesting a calculated plan beyond mere vengeance. Had Sir Reginald been killed to cover the orchid's theft, or was the theft an opportunistic act? Poirot orchestrated a subtle provocation to test the suspects. He gathered them in the conservatory, claiming to have found new evidence that would soon unmask the killer. With Japp's unwitting assistance, he placed a replica of the letter opener on the desk, its jade handle gleaming, and announced that a hidden mark on the original blade, visible only under special light, might reveal the killer's identity. The lie was deliberate, designed to provoke a reaction. As the suspects exchanged uneasy glances, Poirot watched closely. Clara's hands tightened on her handkerchief. Lady Evelyn's smile grew brittle. Dr. Vance adjusted his spectacles repeatedly. Carver's face flushed, and Mrs. Langston's eyes darted to the desk, her fingers twitching. The trap was set, but the killer's response was yet to come. A new witness emerged, complicating the timeline. A maid, Elsie, approached Poirot nervously, admitting she had seen Clara alone in the Manor's Hall at 9:50 p.m., contradicting her alibi of being with Lady Evelyn. "She was near the conservatory door, sir," Elsie whispered, looking anxious like she'd heard something. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Clara's story of fetching her shawl was unravelling, but was she a killer or a witness? Lady Evelyn, questioned again, faltered, admitting she had left the drawing-room briefly to freshen up, weakening their shared alibi. The discrepancy pointed to a gap in the crucial window of 9:30 to 10 p.m. when Sir Reginald was killed. Poirot revisited the groundskeeper's sighting of a shadowy figure at 9:45 p.m. The man, pressed for details, recalled a faint click near the conservatory, like a lock turning. "It was quick, sir, before the scream," he said. Poirot's mind seized on the detail. A duplicate key, perhaps, or a tool to manipulate the bolt. He inspected the bolt again. It scratched now more. Suspicious. A locksmith, summoned by Japp, confirmed the lock was tamper-proof, but Poirot wondered about the drainage grates beneath the planters. He examined one, finding it sealed, but a faint scuff mark nearby suggested recent movement. A hidden exit, he mused, though the grate's weight made it unlikely. The cigarette butt tied to Carver yielded new insight. Poirot sent it for analysis, learning it was fresh, dropped that night, not earlier as Carver claimed. Confronted, Carver stammered, "I might have wandered closer to the conservatory, but I didn't go in." His lie deepened Poirot's suspicion, but the butt's placement felt staged, a red herring to divert attention. Similarly, the blood-smeared orchid leaf, found beneath a pot, was analysed by Dr. Vance, who confirmed it was not Sir Reginald's blood. "It's human, though," he said, his voice unsteady. Poirot suspected the killer had cut themselves in the act, leaving an inadvertent clue. Mrs. Langton's muddy boots became a focal point. Poirot visited her cottage, finding a garden of red clay identical to the conservatory's smudges. Her claim of nighttime gardening was plausible, but the fresh clay on her boots suggested a recent visit to the crime scene. "You were in the conservatory, madame," Poirot said, his tone gentle but firm. She glared, her voice icy. "I told you, I locked it and left." Her defiance, Poirot noted, masked fear. Dr. Vance's sedative vial, half empty despite his claim of non-use, added another twist. Poirot questioned him, noting his growing agitation. "I keep it for emergencies," Dr. Vance snapped, but his evasiveness suggested a darker purpose. Had he planned to drug Sir Reginald, only to abandon the plan for a more violent act? The autopsy, now complete, showed no sedatives in Sir Reginald's system, ruling out poisoning but not intent. Poirot staged a second provocation, rearranging the conservatory's orchids into a coded pattern, a spiral mimicking one in Mrs. Langton's notebook, which he had glimpsed during her interview. He claimed it was a clue left by Sir Reginald, hinting at a secret deal. Mrs. Langton's reaction was immediate, a sharp intake of breath, her hand clutching her notebook. "That's nonsense," she snapped, but her panic betrayed knowledge. Poirot suspected the orchid theft was tied to her expertise, perhaps a plan to sell it on the black market. As the day waned, Poirot gathered the suspects' timelines, now riddled with holes. Clara's solo trip to the hall, Lady Evelyn's vague absence, Dr. Vance's unverified reading, Carver's false terrace claim, and Mrs. Langton's muddy boots painted a picture of deception. The stolen orchid, the coded pattern, the clicked lock, they pointed to a meticulous plan, but the locked room remained the enigma. Poirot stood by the desk, his fingers tracing the spot where the letter opener had rested, and envisioned the murder. A swift strike, staged scene, a vanished killer. "The conservatory guards its secret," he murmured to Jap, "but it will not guard it for long." The suspects, rattled by Poirot's provocations, grew tense, their glances sharp with suspicion. The will's revelations, the orchid's theft, and the crumbling alibis had shifted the case, exposing layers of motive: greed, betrayal, desperation. Poirot's trap was closing, but the killer's next move was imminent, and he knew he must act swiftly to prevent another strike. Chapter 6: The Revelation. The Jade Conservatory glowed under the soft flicker of gas lamps, its glass walls reflecting the tension of the gathered suspects like a prism of deceit. The rain had ceased, leaving a damp chill that clung to the air, mingling with the scent of orchids and the faint memory of blood. Hercule Poirot stood at the centre of the conservatory, his small frame commanding the room with quiet authority. His tailored suit was immaculate, his moustache a perfect curve, but his eyes burned with the intensity of a man who had solved an impossible puzzle. The murder of Sir Reginald Ashbourne, stabbed in a locked room with a jade-handled letter opener, the prized Malaysian orchid stolen, had baffled all but Poirot, whose little grey cells had woven the clues into a tapestry of truth. Inspector Japp stood by the heavy oak door, his notebook clutched tightly, his face a mix of anticipation and skepticism. "Well, Poirot," he said, his voice gruff, "you've kept us waiting. Who's the killer? And how in blazes did they manage it in a locked room?" The suspects, Clara Ashbourne, Lady Evelyn Marwood, Dr. Harold Vance, Julian Carver, and Mrs. Beatrice Langston stood in a tense semicircle, their expressions ranging from fear to defiance. Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "The murder of Sir Reginald," he began, his voice deliberate and resonant, "was not merely a crime of passion or greed. It was a performance, meticulously staged to deceive. But the truth, mes amis, cannot hide from Hercule Poirot." He began with the clues, laying them out like cards on a table. The red clay smudges, found near the desk and body, were the first thread. "This clay," Poirot said, holding up a sample in a handkerchief, "matches the soil of Madame Langston's cottage garden, yet she claimed to have remained in her cottage after locking the conservatory." Mrs. Langston's face tightened, her hands gripping her notebook of orchid sketches. Poirot continued, gesturing to the oak door. The bolt bore a scratch, faint but fresh, suggesting tampering, and the Malaysian orchid, thought crushed, was stolen, a common variety left in its place to mislead us. Poirot turned to the suspects, his gaze piercing. "Each of you had motive. Mademoiselle Clara, your uncle's refusal to modernize the estate fueled your ambition, and his will, demanding marriage, was a chain you despised." Clara's eyes flashed, but she remained silent. "Madame Marwood, your annuity depended on the estate's solvency, threatened by Monsieur Carver's losses." Lady Evelyn's smile was brittle, her fingers brushing her incomplete necklace. "Dr. Vance, your debts and Sir Reginald's ingratitude stung deeply." Vance adjusted his spectacles, his face pale. "Monsieur Carver, your failed investments and a forged promissory note suggested desperation or blackmail." Carver's jaw clenched, his cufflinks glinting. "And Madame Langston, your years of service, dismissed by Sir Reginald, bred a bitterness as potent as any poison." Poirot paced, his voice slow and deliberate, drawing the listeners into his logic. The locked room was the heart of the puzzle. The door was bolted, the glass walls unbreached, the roof secure. Yet the killer entered, struck, and vanished. How? Let us reconstruct. He pointed to the desk, where the letter opener had rested. The weapon was Sir Reginald's own, wiped clean of prints, a calculated act. The tobacco scent, absent during the tour, pointed to a smoker. The repay by midnight note, found beneath a pot, suggested a financial motive, but was too convenient, a red herring to implicate Monsieur Carver. The breakthrough came with the orchid. Poirot revealed that the stolen Malaysian orchid was not merely valuable, but unique, its rarity known only to an expert. "Madame Langston," he said, turning to the botanist, "you alone understood its worth. You claimed the crushed petals were an accident, but the substitution of a common orchid was deliberate. You stole the true orchid, intending to sell it." Mrs. Langston's eyes widened, her notebook slipping slightly. Poirot pressed on. "The red clay on your boots placed you in the conservatory after the tour. The blood-smeared leaf, not Sir Reginald's, was yours. A cut sustained while staging the scene. The locked room solution was Poirot's masterstroke. The conservatory, he said, has a hidden drainage grate beneath a planter used for irrigation. It is heavy but movable, and you, Madame Langston, knew its secret. You entered after the tour, using a duplicate key you had forged, a key that left the scratch on the bolt. You confronted Sir Reginald, your rage over his dismissal of your expertise boiling over. In a moment of fury, you stabbed him with the letter opener, then wiped it clean. You exited through the grate, resealing it, and hid the orchid in your cottage." Poirot's voice softened, his tone almost sympathetic. "The tobacco scent was your mistake, madame. You smoked in secret, a habit I traced to your cottage, where I found Turkish cigarettes, matching Monsieur Carver's, a clever attempt to shift blame. He produced the blood-smeared leaf, holding it aloft. This leaf, cut from the staged orchid, bore your blood, a wound from your haste. The repay by midnight note was another ruse, planted to suggest Carver's guilt. But the clay, the scratch, the leaf, they betrayed you. Mrs. Langston's composure cracked, her face crumpling. He mocked me, she burst out, her voice raw. Years of work, my orchids, his orchids he called them. I deserved that flower, my freedom. Her confession spilled forth. She had forged the key months ago, planning to steal the orchid. When Sir Reginald caught her in the conservatory, dismissing her as a mere gardener, her rage erupted. The letter opener, a symbol of his arrogance, became her weapon. The crushed orchid was a cover, the stolen one hidden for sale to a black market dealer. Japp, stunned, signalled his men to restrain her, but Poirot raised a hand. "One moment, mon ami. Let us address the others." He turned to Clara, whose grief masked a secret plan to sell part of the estate, uncovered during his provocations. "Your ambition, mademoiselle, was not murder, but it clouded your honesty." To Lady Evelyn, he said, "Your silence about Madame Langston's discontent protected your annuity, a moral failing, not a crime." Dr. Vance's sedative vial, he revealed, was unused, his motive mere resentment. Carver's forged note was a desperate ploy, not murder, though his lies had muddied the case. Poirot's denouement was complete. The conservatory, once a fortress of glass, had yielded its secret through the killer's human errors, the clay, the blood, the tobacco. The locked room, he said, is no match for the little grey cells. The truth, mes amis, is always in the details. Mrs. Langston, tears streaming, was led away by Japp's men, her confession sealing her fate. The stolen orchid, Poirot revealed, had been found in her cottage, hidden in a pot of common blooms, a final irony. As the suspects dispersed, their faces a mix of relief and shame, Poirot stood by the desk, his gaze lingering on the spot where the letter opener had rested. The conservatory, now quiet, seemed to exhale, its secrets laid bare. Japp clapped Poirot's shoulder, grudgingly impressed. "You've done it again, Poirot. But that great? How'd you know?" Poirot smiled. "Observation, mon ami. The planter's scuff mark, the clay's trail. They spoke when questioned." The revelation left the manor in a state of uneasy calm. Clara, shaken, vowed to honour her uncle's legacy while pursuing her dreams. Lady Evelyn's annuity was secure, though her cunning was exposed. Carver and Vance faced their own reckonings, their motives laid bare. Poirot, his work done, felt the weight of human frailty, the passions that had turned beauty into bloodshed. The Jade Conservatory, with its locked doors and hidden grates, was a puzzle solved, but its lesson lingered. Secrets, like orchids, bloom in the shadows, but cannot hide forever. Chapter 7. Justice Served. The Jade Conservatory, its glass walls now bathed in the golden light of a crisp autumn morning, stood serene, as if cleansed of the tragedy that had unfolded, within its confines. The blood-stained tiles had been scrubbed, the crushed orchid petals swept away, but the memory of Sir Reginald Ashbourne's murder lingered like a faint perfume. Hercule Poirot, his small frame impeccable in a tailored suit, stood near the mahogany desk where the jade-handled letter-opener had once rested, now the instrument of a crime solved. His moustache gleamed, his eyes sharp with the satisfaction of a puzzle unravelled. The revelation of Mrs. Beatrice Langston as the killer, her rage-fueled murder, her theft of the Malaysian orchid, her cunning use of a hidden drainage grate, had brought clarity to the locked room mystery, but the task of justice remained. Inspector Japp, his bluster softened by Poirot's triumph, oversaw the final steps in the conservatory. "You've outdone yourself, Poirot," he said, his voice gruff but admiring. "A duplicate key, a hidden grate, and that blasted orchid. Never would have pegged Langston for it." Poirot's lips curved into a modest smile. "The little grey cells, mon ami. They see what the eyes miss. But now we ensure the scales of justice are balanced." The suspects, Clara Ashbourne, Lady Evelyn Marwood, Dr. Harold Vance, and Julian Carver, gathered in the Manor's drawing-room, their faces a mix of relief, guilt, and unease, as Poirot prepared to tie up the case's loose ends. Mrs. Langston, now in custody, sat in a small anteroom under guard, her stern demeanour shattered. Poirot had requested a final meeting with her, not to gloat, but to understand the depths of her motives. Escorted by Japp's men, she entered the drawing-room, her calloused hands cuffed, her eyes hollow. "Madame Langston," Poirot began, his voice gentle yet firm, "your confession has illuminated much, but I must know, why risk all for an orchid?" Her lips trembled, and the words spilled forth, a torrent of pent-up pain. "He took everything," she said, her voice raw. "My work, my discoveries, he claimed them as his own. That orchid was mine, my masterpiece, and he mocked it as his trophy. I wanted freedom, a chance to start anew." Poirot nodded, his expression sombre. Her rage, sparked by years of being dismissed as a mere gardener, had driven her to forge a duplicate key, enter the conservatory after the tour, and confront Sir Reginald. When he belittled her once more, the letter opener became her weapon, the stolen orchid her ticket to a new life. The crushed petals, a common variety, were a ruse to mask the theft, and the drainage grate her escape. But the red clay on her boots, the blood-smeared leaf, the tobacco scent from her secret smoking, they were her undoing, betraying her to Poirot's relentless logic. Japp's men had searched her cottage, recovering the Malaysian orchid hidden in a pot of common blooms, its vibrant petals a silent testament to her ambition. The duplicate key, crudely made, was found in her desk, its scratches matching the mark on the conservatory's bolt. The repay by midnight note, planted to implicate Carver, was confirmed as her handwriting, a desperate attempt to divert suspicion. "You planned well, madame," Poirot said, "but the human heart betrays itself in small errors." Mrs. Langston's shoulders sagged, and she was led away, her fate sealed by her own confession. Poirot turned his attention to the other suspects, each grappling with the fallout. Clara Ashbourne, her emerald gown replaced by sombre black, stood by the drawing-room's fireplace, her eyes red from tears but resolute. The will's condition, that she marry within a year to inherit, still weighed on her, but Poirot's revelation of her secret plan to sell part of the estate had humbled her. "Mademoiselle," he said softly, "your ambition is not a crime, but honesty will serve you better than secrets." Clara nodded, her voice steady. "I'll honour Uncle's legacy, but I'll do it my way, without selling out." Poirot approved, sensing her resolve to balance tradition with progress. Lady Evelyn Marwood, her sapphire necklace now repaired, maintained her polished composure, but Poirot's accusation of her silence, knowing Mrs. Langston's discontent but protecting her own annuity, had stung. "Madam," he said, "your cunning preserved your future, but at what cost to your conscience?" She met his gaze, her smile faint. "I did what I had to, Mr. Poirot. Survival is not pretty." Her annuity was secure, but her moral ambiguity left a shadow, one Poirot chose not to judge further. Dr. Harold Vance, his spectacles polished but his demeanour subdued, had been cleared of murder. But his half-empty sedative vial hinted at darker intentions. "Doctor," Poirot said, "your resentment was not lethal, but your silence about it was unwise." Vance admitted his frustration with Sir Reginald's unpaid fees, but swore the sedative was for his own insomnia. "I'm no killer," he muttered, and Poirot believed him, though his debts would linger as a personal reckoning. Julian Carver, the brash stockbroker, stood by the window, his cufflinks dull in the morning light. His forged promissory note, meant to pressure Sir Reginald, had marked him as a suspect, but Poirot's logic had cleared him. "Monsieur Carver," Poirot said, "your desperation led to deceit, not murder. Learn from this." Carver's face flushed, but he nodded, vowing to rebuild his finances honestly. The cigarette butt, a red herring planted by Mrs. Langston, had nearly ensnared him, a lesson in the dangers of appearances. Poirot orchestrated a final act to ensure justice resonated. With Japp's approval, he arranged for the Malaysian orchid to be donated to a botanical society, its rarity preserved for study rather than profit. "It is what Sir Reginald would have wanted in his better moments," Poirot said, and Clara agreed, her resolve strengthened. The conservatory, once a stage for murder, would become a symbol of renewal, its glass walls housing beauty rather than betrayal. As the suspects dispersed, the manor felt lighter, as if the weight of secrets had lifted. Poirot retired to the drawing-room, sipping tea served by a grateful maid, Elsie, whose testimony had cracked Clara's alibi. He reflected on the case, his mind tracing the threads, the clay, the leaf, the tobacco, the grate, that had unravelled the puzzle. "The human heart, mon ami," he said to Japp, "is as complex as any locked room. It locks itself, but the truth always finds a key." Japp chuckled, shaking his head. "You're a marvel, Poirot. What's next? Another impossible crime?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "If it is impossible, I shall make it possible." The manor's staff, shaken but relieved, began restoring order. Clara met with the solicitor, Mr. Wren, to discuss the estate's future, her plans tempered by newfound humility. Lady Evelyn prepared to return to London, her charm intact but her conscience pricked. Vance and Carver, chastened, faced their personal struggles, their roles in the drama minor but humbling. Mrs. Langston, awaiting trial, would face justice in a London courtroom, her story a cautionary tale of pride and rage. Poirot took a final walk through the conservatory, its orchids vibrant under the morning sun. The hidden grate, now exposed, was a reminder of human ingenuity and error. The jade-green tiles, once stained with blood, gleamed anew, and the air carried only the scent of blooms. He paused by the desk, envisioning Sir Reginald's final moments, a man undone by his own arrogance. "Justice," Poirot murmured, "is not vengeance, but balance." With that he turned, his polished shoes clicking on the tiles, and left the conservatory, his work complete. As he prepared to depart Ashbourne Manor, Poirot glanced back at the glass structure, its beauty restored, but forever marked by its secrets. The train to London awaited, and with it the promise of new puzzles. He boarded, his mind already turning to the next challenge, his little grey cells ever restless. The Jade Conservatory, with its locked doors and hidden truths, was a chapter closed, but the world, Poirot knew, was full of mysteries waiting to be solved. Chapter 8. A Hidden Alliance. The Jade Conservatory, its glass walls catching the soft hues of a late autumn afternoon, stood as a quiet sentinel over Ashbourne Manor. The murder of Sir Reginald Ashbourne, stabbed in a locked room, The Malaysian orchid stolen by the confessed killer, Mrs. Beatrice Langston, had been solved, yet Hercule Poirot lingered at the estate. Clara Ashbourne, the young heiress, had requested his counsel on the manor's future, sensing his keen insight extended beyond crime to the complexities of human motives. Poirot, his tailored suit pristine and his moustache gleaming, walked the conservatory's jade-green tiles, his little grey cells still alert to the undercurrents of tension that lingered like the scent of orchids. The manor, though relieved by the resolution of the murder, was not at peace. Clara's plans to modernize the estate, introducing mechanized farming and new crops, faced resistance from the staff, who clung to tradition as fiercely as Sir Reginald had. Poirot, invited to stay an extra day, sensed an opportunity to probe deeper, not into the murder, but into the dynamics that had fueled its backdrop. The conservatory, now restored to its pristine beauty, seemed to whisper of secrets yet untold, and Poirot's instincts told him the case, though closed, had left ripples. In the manor's library, Poirot met with Clara, her black morning dress a stark contrast to her earlier emerald gown. Her eyes, though weary, burned with determination. "Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice steady, "I want to honour Uncle's legacy, but the staff resist my plans. They see me as an upstart, not a leader." Poirot nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "Leadership, mademoiselle, is not merely vision, but understanding the hearts of those you lead. Let us walk the grounds and listen." His suggestion was more than courtesy. He suspected the manor's tensions held clues to a deeper truth, one that had simmered beneath the murder. As they strolled the estate's gardens, Poirot observed the staff, groundskeepers pruning hedges, maids whispering in doorways, the butler overseeing with a rigid frown. Their deference to Clara was tinged with skepticism, a silent rebellion against change. Poirot's attention, however, was drawn to a chance encounter near the stables. Dr. Harold Vance, the family physician, and Julian Carver, the stockbroker, stood in hushed conversation, their heads close, their gestures furtive. Poirot, unnoticed, paused behind a hedge, his ears sharp. "We can't let her sell," Carver hissed, his cufflinks glinting. "If the estate's split, we're finished." Vance's voice was low, nervous. "Keep quiet, Julian. She doesn't know yet." Poirot's little grey cells sparked. A hidden alliance between Vance and Carver? Their motives, Vance's debts, Carver's financial ruin, had been exposed during the murder investigation, but this conversation suggested a shared agenda beyond personal gain. He approached, his demeanour casual. "Messieurs," he said, his voice mild, "a fine day for a chat, no?" Carver flinched, his face flushing, while Vance adjusted his spectacles, stammering, "Just discussing investments." Poirot's smile was disarming, but his eyes missed nothing. "Investments, or the estate's future? Speak plainly, s'il vous plaît." Under Poirot's gentle pressure, the truth emerged. Vance and Carver had formed a clandestine partnership before the murder, pooling resources to buy a portion of Ashbourne Manor's land, if Clara's modernization plans led to a sale. Sir Reginald's refusal to modernize had thwarted their scheme, and his death had raised hopes that Clara's reforms would open the door. "We meant no harm," Vance insisted, his voice strained. "It was business, nothing to do with the murder." Carver nodded, his bravado gone. "We just saw a chance to recover our losses." Poirot's mind raced, connecting this alliance to the murder's context. Mrs. Langston's confession had cleared them of the crime, but their secrecy had muddied the investigation, their alibis weakened by half-truths. The repay by midnight note, planted by Langston to implicate Carver, had nearly ensnared him. A stroke of luck for their scheme's secrecy. "Your silence," Poirot said, his tone stern, "complicated justice. Had you been open, the truth might have surfaced sooner." Both men, chastened, agreed to disclose their plan to Clara, hoping to salvage their reputations. Poirot escorted them to the drawing-room, where Clara listened, her face a mix of shock and resolve. "You thought to profit from my plans without my knowledge?" she asked, her voice sharp. Vance hung his head, while Carver muttered an apology. Poirot intervened, his voice soothing. "Mademoiselle, their intent was not malicious but misguided. Use this knowledge to strengthen your leadership." Clara nodded, her anger softening into determination. "I'll consider their proposal, but on my terms. The estate will not be carved up." The revelation of the alliance, though not criminal, deepened the case's complexity. Exposing the web of ambitions that had surrounded Sir Reginald's death, Poirot reflected on the parallels between the manor's rigid traditions and the locked conservatory, both resistant to change, yet vulnerable to human flaws. He advised Clara privately, suggesting she engage the staff in her vision, not as a dictator, but as a collaborator. "The heart of an estate, mademoiselle," he said, "is its people, not its land." Clara, grateful, vowed to bridge the divide, her resolve a beacon for the manor's future. Poirot returned to the conservatory, its glass walls now a symbol of clarity rather than mystery. He stood by the desk, recalling the letter opener, the red clay, the stolen orchid, all pieces of a puzzle now solved. The hidden grate, through which Mrs. Langston had escaped, was sealed. A precaution to prevent future misuse. The Malaysian orchid, recovered and donated to a botanical society, would live on as a legacy of beauty, not greed. Poirot's thoughts turned to the alliance, a reminder that even in the aftermath of murder, human motives continued to weave new threads. He met with Inspector Japp in the manor's hall, sharing the discovery. Japp, surprised, scratched his head. "No crime in their scheme, but it's a devil of a complication. You've a knack for digging up secrets, Poirot." Poirot smiled, his eyes twinkling. "The secrets, mon ami, are like orchids. They bloom where least expected." Japp chuckled, promising to note the alliance in his report, though it warranted no charges. As evening fell, Poirot dined with Clara and the remaining guests, the atmosphere lighter but still tinged with reflection. Lady Evelyn Marwood, her annuity secure, offered a toast to Clara's leadership, her charm masking her earlier cunning. Vance and Carver, subdued, pledged transparency, their alliance now an open book. The staff, informed of Clara's inclusive plans, began to soften, their skepticism giving way to cautious hope. Poirot, sipping his wine, observed the shift, satisfied that his presence had sparked more than justice. It had planted seeds of change. He took a final stroll through the conservatory, its silence soothing after days of turmoil. The jade-green tiles gleamed, the orchids vibrant, the air free of blood's tang. Poirot paused by the planter that had concealed the drainage grate, a testament to human ingenuity and error. "The manor, like the heart," he murmured, "must open to grow." His work here was done, but the echoes of the case, the alliance, the motives, the locked room, would linger, a reminder of the delicate balance between truth and trust. As he prepared to depart, Poirot glanced at the conservatory one last time, its glass walls reflecting the fading light. The train to London awaited, and with it new mysteries. The Jade Conservatory, its secrets exposed, was a chapter closed, but its lessons, of ambition, betrayal, and redemption would endure in Poirot's mind, ready to inform the next puzzle. Chapter 9. The Hidden Motives. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the grounds of Ashbourne Manor, its golden rays filtering through the glass walls of the Jade Conservatory, where the air was thick with the scent of orchids and the echoes of a resolved murder. Hercule Poirot, his tailored suit as impeccable as ever, stood within the conservatory, his sharp eyes tracing the jade-green tiles where Sir Reginald Ashbourne had met his end. The case was closed. Mrs. Beatrice Langton's confession, her theft of the Malaysian orchid, and her use of a hidden drainage grate had unravelled the locked room mystery. But Poirot's little grey cells remained restless. The revelation of a secret alliance between Dr. Harold Vance and Julian Carver had hinted at deeper currents, and Poirot sensed that the manor still held truths unspoken, motives that lingered like the conservatory's perfume. Clara Ashbourne, now the estate's heiress, had asked Poirot to stay another day, valuing his insight as she navigated the challenges of leadership. The staff's resistance to her modernization plans, coupled with the fallout of the murder, had left the manor in a state of uneasy transition. Poirot, ever attuned to human nature, suspected that the suspect's actions during the investigation, particularly Lady Evelyn Marwood's calculated silence, held clues to moral ambiguities that had shaped the tragedy. He resolved to probe further, not to uncover new crimes, but to illuminate the kitscheste hidden motives that had fueled the case's complexity. Poirot began in the manor's drawing room, where he invited Lady Evelyn for a private conversation. Her sapphire necklace gleamed, its repaired clasp a reminder of her presence in the conservatory after the tour. She settled gracefully into a velvet chair, her smile polished but wary. "Madame Marwood," Poirot said, his voice soft yet piercing, "you knew of Madame Langton's discontent, yet you remained silent. Why?" Her composure faltered, her fingers brushing the necklace. "I suspected her frustration," she admitted, her voice low. "Beatrice ranted about Sir Reginald's disregard for her work, but I thought it harmless. I needed my annuity, Mr. Poirot. Speaking out risked everything." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his moustache twitching. "Your silence, madame, protected your interests but prolonged the truth. Had you spoken, Madame Langton's rage might have been addressed before it turned deadly." Lady Evelyn's gaze dropped, her hands folding tightly. "I was selfish," she confessed, "but not a killer. My husband's debts left me no choice. I needed Sir Reginald's favour." Her motive, Poirot realised, was not greed but survival, a desperate bid to secure her future in a world unkind to widowed socialites. Her silence, though not criminal, had been a moral failing, a thread in the tapestry of deceit that had shielded Mrs. Langton's plan. Poirot's inquiry shifted to the broader dynamics of the manor. He walked the grounds with Clara, observing the staff's guarded interactions. The butler, Mr. Grayson, a stern traditionalist, spoke of Sir Reginald with reverence, but eyed Clara's plans with suspicion. "The manor's been this way for generations," he told Poirot, his tone clipped. "Miss Clara's ideas, machines, new crops, they'll ruin us." Poirot noted the butler's loyalty to the past, a mirror to Sir Reginald's own rigidity, which had fueled Mrs. Langton's rage. The groundskeepers, too, whispered of Clara's youth and inexperience, their resistance rooted in fear of change rather than malice. In the conservatory, Poirot reflected on the parallels between the manor's tensions and the locked-room murder. Both were fortresses, glass walls and tradition, guarding secrets but vulnerable to human flaws. He examined the spot where the jade-handled letter opener had struck, its clean handle a testament to Mrs. Langston's calculation. The stolen orchid, now safe with the Botanical Society, had been her prize, but her motive, resentment over stolen credit, echoed the Manor's broader struggle. A clash between recognition and dismissal, progress and stagnation. A new discovery deepened the case's moral complexity. Poirot, reviewing Mrs. Langston's notebook, found a letter tucked within, unsent, addressed to a botanical journal. It detailed her discovery of a rare orchid hybrid, credited to Sir Reginald in a recent publication. "He stole my work," she had written, her script trembling with anger. "My years of toil claimed as his triumphant hour." The letter, never mailed, was a cry of betrayal, and Poirot realized that Sir Reginald's arrogance had not only sparked her rage, but silenced her legacy. This motive, more personal than mere wages, added depth to her crime, transforming her from a disgruntled employee into a woman wronged by intellectual theft. Poirot confronted Clara with this find, sharing the letter in the library's quiet. Her face paled as she read, her hands trembling. "I didn't know," she whispered. "Uncle never mentioned her contributions." Poirot nodded, his tone gentle. "Your uncle's pride blinded him, mademoiselle, as it blinded Madame Langston to reason. Learn from this. Honour those who serve you." Clara vowed to acknowledge the staff's work, particularly the gardeners, in her modernization plans, ensuring their expertise would not be overlooked. The hidden motives extended to the other suspects. Poirot met Dr. Vance in the Manor's study, where the physician's nervous tics betrayed his unease. The sedative vial, half empty, had been a red herring, but Poirot pressed him on his resentment. "Sir Reginald treated me like a servant," Vance admitted, his voice bitter. "I saved his life twice, yet he never paid on time." His motive, though not murderous, had clouded his honesty, weakening his alibi. Poirot advised him to seek new opportunities, free from the Manor's shadow. Julian Carver, encountered in the stables, was equally forthcoming under Poirot's probing gaze. His forged promissory note, meant to pressure Sir Reginald, stemmed from desperation to recover his losses. "I was a fool," Carver said, his bravado gone, "but I never meant harm." His alliance with Vance, though misguided, was a bid for survival, not malice. Poirot urged him to rebuild honestly, noting that his transparency with Clara had softened her judgment. The Manor's staff, informed of Clara's commitment to fairness, began to warm to her leadership. Poirot orchestrated a meeting in the dining room, where Clara addressed them, promising to preserve the estate's heritage while embracing innovation. "I need your knowledge," she said, her voice earnest. "Together we'll make Ashbourne Manor thrive." The butler, Grayson, nodded reluctantly, a sign of thawing resistance. Poirot, observing, saw the seeds of unity taking root, a contrast to the divisiveness that had fueled the murder. In the conservatory, Poirot stood by the planter that had concealed the drainage grate, now sealed to prevent future misuse. The jade-green tiles gleamed, the orchids vibrant, the air free of blood's tang. He reflected on the hidden motives: Lady Evelyn's survival, Vance's resentment, Carver's desperation, Langston's betrayal, that had woven a web around Sir Reginald's death. "The heart," he murmured, "hides its motives, but not from the little grey cells." The conservatory, once a stage for murder, was now a symbol of clarity, its secrets exposed to the light. As evening fell, Poirot dined with Clara and the staff, the atmosphere lighter but reflective. Lady Evelyn, her cunning acknowledged, pledged to support Clara's plans, her annuity a reminder of her pragmatism. Vance and Carver, humbled, prepared to leave, their futures uncertain but honest. The staff, inspired by Clara's sincerity, began to see her as a leader, not an upstart. Poirot, sipping his wine, felt the manor's pulse steadying, its wounds beginning to heal. He took a final walk through the conservatory, its glass walls reflecting the fading light. The letter opener's spot on the desk was empty, the orchid's absence a silent lesson. The manor, like the conservatory, had been locked in its own way, but Poirot's presence had opened doors to trust and change. As he prepared to depart, he glanced back, satisfied that the hidden motives, though not crimes, had been laid bare, ensuring the manor's future would be built on truth. Chapter 10. The Final Farewell. The Jade Conservatory glowed under the soft light of a late autumn morning, its glass walls reflecting the golden hues of a sun breaking through the clouds. The air was crisp, carrying the sweet scent of orchids. Free at last from the taint of blood and betrayal, Hercule Poirot, his tailored suit impeccable and his moustache a perfect curve, stood within the conservatory, his sharp eyes lingering on the jade-green tiles where Sir Reginald Ashbourne had met his end. The locked-room murder, solved through the revelation of Mrs. Beatrice Langston's rage-fueled crime and her theft of the Malaysian orchid, had been a triumph of his little grey cells. Yet, as he prepared to depart Ashbourne Manor, Poirot felt the weight of the case's deeper truths, the human motives and alliances that had woven a complex tapestry around the tragedy. Clara Ashbourne, the young heiress now poised to lead the estate, had invited Poirot to host a final gathering in the conservatory, a gesture to mark the manor's new beginning. The staff, once resistant to her modernization plans, had begun to embrace her vision, inspired by her commitment to fairness and recognition of their work. The suspects, Lady Evelyn Marwood, Gestator Dr. Harold Vance, and Julian Carver, remained, their roles in the drama clarified, their motives laid bare. Poirot, sensing an opportunity to impart one last lesson, agreed to the gathering, his mind already turning to the insights he would share. The conservatory, restored to its pristine beauty, was adorned with fresh orchids, their vibrant petals a stark contrast to the memory of the crushed Malaysian bloom. Clara had arranged a tea service on a wrought-iron table, the delicate clink of porcelain cups mingling with the soft hum of conversation. The staff, including the butler Mr. Grayson and the maid Elsie, moved with newfound ease, their skepticism replaced by cautious optimism. Poirot stood by the mahogany desk, once home to the deadly jade-handled letter-opener, and surveyed the gathering. "Mes amis," he began, his voice warm yet commanding, "we gather not to dwell on tragedy, but to reflect on truth and renewal." He addressed Clara first, her black mourning dress softened by a green scarf, a nod to her uncle's conservatory. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said, "you have inherited more than an estate. You have inherited its heart. Your promise to honour the staff, to give voice to those like Madame Langston, ensures Ashbourne Manor's future." Clara's eyes shone with gratitude. "You've shown me what leadership means, Mr. Poirot," she said. "I'll make this place a home for progress and respect." Her resolve, tempered by the case's lessons, was a beacon for the manor's transformation. Poirot turned to Lady Evelyn, her sapphire necklace catching the light. Her silence about Mrs. Langston's discontent, driven by the need to secure her annuity, had been a moral lapse, but not a crime. "Madame Marwood," he said, his tone gentle but firm, "your pragmatism served you, but truth serves all. Your support for Mademoiselle Clara is a step toward redemption. Lady Evelyn nodded, her smile less guarded. "I've learned to listen, Mr. Poirot," she said. "I'll stand by Clara, not for gain, but for friendship." Her pledge, though tinged with her characteristic cunning, felt sincere, a shift from self-preservation to community. Dr. Vance, his spectacles polished but his demeanour subdued, stood near the tea-table. His resentment towards Sir Reginald, fuelled by unpaid fees, had clouded his honesty, but Poirot's clearing of his name had lifted a burden. "Doctor," Poirot said, "your skills are your strength, not your grudges. Seek a path where they are valued." Vance, humbled, admitted his plans to leave the manor for a London practice. "I'll start fresh," he said, his voice steady. "No more secrets." His departure, Poirot sensed, would be a new beginning, free from the manor's shadows. Julian Carver, his cufflinks less flashy in the morning light, stood by a fern, his bravado replaced by introspection. His alliance with Vance, a scheme to profit from a potential land sale, had been exposed, and his forged promissory note had nearly ensnared him in the murder's web. "Monsieur Carver," Poirot said, "your ambition led to deceit, but honesty can lead to redemption. Support the manor's future, not its division." Carver, chastened, agreed to work with Clara, offering his financial expertise to stabilize the estate. "I owe it to her," he said, his voice low. "No more schemes." His commitment, though born of necessity, was a step toward integrity. Poirot addressed the staff, gathered at Clara's insistence, their faces a mix of curiosity and respect. "You are the soul of this manor," he said, his Idaldi voice resonant. "Your work, like Madame Langston's, deserves recognition. Trust Mademoiselle Clara, and she will trust you." The butler, Grayson, nodded, his rigid demeanour softening. "We'll try, sir," he said, a rare warmth in his tone. Elsie, the maid whose testimony had cracked Clara's alibi, smiled shyly, her role in the case a quiet pride. The staff's tentative unity, Poirot knew, was the foundation for Clara's vision. He shared a final lesson, his voice deliberate, drawing the group into his words. "Observation, mes amis, is the key to truth. In this conservatory, I observe not only clues, the red clay, the blood-smeared leaf, the hidden grate, but the hearts that hid them. The human soul, like a locked room, guards its secrets, but with patience it opens." He gestured to the conservatory, its glass walls gleaming. "This place, once a stage for murder, is now a symbol of clarity. Let it remind you to see, to listen, to understand." The tea concluded with a toast, led by Clara, to Ashbourne Manor's future. The clink of cups, the murmur of agreement filled the conservatory with hope. Poirot, sipping his tea, felt a quiet satisfaction. The case had been more than a murder. It had been a mirror to human flaws and strengths. The stolen orchid, donated to a botanical society, would bloom for knowledge, not greed. The hidden grate, sealed forever, was a reminder of cunning, outwitted by logic. The manor under Clara's leadership was poised for renewal, its wounds healing through trust. As the gathering dispersed, Poirot took a final walk through the conservatory, its orchids vibrant, its air free of betrayal's weight. He paused by the planter that had concealed the drainage grate, its scuff marks a faint memory of Mrs. Langston's escape. The jade-green tiles, once stained with blood, gleamed anew, a testament to restoration. "The heart, like this conservatory," he murmured, "is fragile but resilient. It breaks, but it mends." His work here was complete, the puzzle solved, the lessons imparted. Outside, the manor's grounds were alive with activity. Groundskeepers tending the gardens, maids bustling with renewed purpose. Clara, standing on the terrace, waved to Poirot, her green scarf a symbol of hope. Lady Evelyn, preparing for London, offered a parting nod, her charm tempered by humility. Vance and Carver, their futures uncertain but honest, exchanged plans for departure, their alliance dissolved, but their lessons learned. The staff, under Grayson's steady guidance, worked with a new sense of purpose, their trust in Clara growing. Poirot boarded the train to London, his small suitcase at his side, his mind already turning to new mysteries. The Jade Conservatory faded into the distance, its glass walls a memory of a case that had tested his intellect and his understanding of human nature. The world, he thought, is a conservatory of secrets, waiting for the little grey cells to bring them to light. As the train's whistle sounded, he settled into his seat, the rhythm of the rails a soothing counterpoint to his restless curiosity. The manor now behind him would thrive under Clara's care, its legacy no longer locked in tradition but open to progress. The Jade Conservatory, with its beauty and its scars, had been a stage for murder and redemption, a puzzle solved by observation and truth. Poirot closed his eyes, a faint smile on his lips, ready for the next challenge, the next locked room, the next heart to unlock.